Hello and welcome to Video Revealed. I'm Colin Smith. This is the Effects Control Teardown. All right, I've got different kinds of tutorials throughout that have one or two things from the effects control. So I thought it was time for me to just do one complete tutorial just on what you do with the effects control panel. First of all, it's not the effects that you apply. There's two effects panels. One has the effects, the other one makes changes to the settings in the effect. Let's look at that first. So I'm using the Essentials workspace. This is a new workspace that I prefer. And there's the effects control panel. And over here are the actual effects. So if you look in here, you'll see all of the different effects. Okay, so when you apply an effect from the effects, you change them in the effects control panel. Now, although I do like the Essentials workspace, I think this is a little bit too narrow for effects, but we've got room on my 17-inch monitor. This is the room I have on my big 4K display. It's even bigger. So I'm going to drag this out. I don't want to make the screen smaller, so I'll drag it out just to that point. Okay. And if you want, you can save this as a new workspace. So save this as a new one and then name it, and it will always be that size. I just find that it's too cramped and cluttered. Next is where the keyframes show up. Well, that's this little triangle here, and it opens and closes the area where the keyframes will show up. So the effects controls are where we're going to edit anything that goes on with an image, including the scale of an image, the opacity of an image. Those are intrinsic effects. That means that every single clip has specific effects that are always there, both audio and video. So if I click on this first clip, you'll see, and I'll close all of these up, motion, opacity, and time remapping. You can't delete those. You can't get rid of them. You can't reorder them. That's the order. They happen at the end of what you do with a clip. And of course, to get into any of these settings, you can open up and see the settings. For instance, the position settings and scale, and everything here that's changeable is blue. The stopwatches are not blue until you click on them. And now you've added a keyframe, and that's what this is here. Click on it again. You'll be warned that you're getting rid of the keyframe. Click on it. It's gone. Okay, so that's cool. That's great. That's where your effects show up. If you have a video clip with audio, watch how it changes. So I'll twirl that up. Now this one has both audio on it, and you can see I've got volume, bypass level, channel volume, and the panner. Why are there two volumes? Well, there's an overall volume, and then there's a channel volume. This is a stereo track, so it has a left and right channel. I have never used channel volume in here, but it's there in case you needed to correct that. And then a balance control for going left or right. You can close those up. The state of these now is saved. So if I open opacity and then go to a different clip, you'll see that it stays open. For probably 20 years, that didn't happen. It always reset itself. You can also open all of these by holding the Alt key on Windows, Option on Mac, and clicking, or close them all. Sometimes you've applied tons of effects and they're all open and you want to just get to one, and you can easily close them up and then just open the one. Kind of like soloing the effects. Now, the other one that gets people a lot is selecting more than one clip. And if I select this clip, you can see I get the effects. If I select this clip, effects controls. If I select more than one clip, it disappears. I think this is just old. This is just part of the old code that's in here. Modern applications will show you the settings that these clips have that they share, like scale or position. But the way that the effects controls work is they do not. They just turn off if you have more than one thing selected. I'll get to copying and pasting effects in a second. So that's important to know. All right. And if we wanted to add an effect, Over on our effects here, we could either search for an effect or twirl this down. One thing that I think a lot of people miss is they drag and drop all the way over here. If you have a clip selected, you only have to double click on an effect for it to show up over here. This is incredibly useful if you've got multiple clips selected. You want to apply one effect to multiple clips, select them all, double click on it, and they're all applied. They all are independent, so changing one doesn't change the other. That's what you would use an adjustment layer for. Okay, so here we have our Gaussian blur, and if I turn this up, and I'm a big fan of not putting in numbers. I'm a graphic guy, so I just like to drag this to the right and see a change. So let's say I wanted to create an effect that looks like an out of focus lens, and then it goes into focus, like a rack focus. So for that, I'll make sure my playhead is all the way at the beginning. I'll click once here to add a keyframe, and I'll blur this, and then I'll go later somewhere, and then I'll unblur this. Now I've got two keyframes. If you want something to be faster, you move the keyframes closer together. If you want it to be slower, you move them further away. Okay, pretty simple. That's really the basics of applying an effect and applying a keyframe. You can have any number of effects and any number of keyframes. The keyframes themselves are linear. I'll put a link in the description to a special kind of keyframe called a spatial keyframe. If you've ever tried to animate things and instead of moving like this, they kind of wander around, that's not an error. That's part of spatial keyframes. And like I said, watch that tutorial. I'll link it at the end too. But if you want to right click on a keyframe, you can change it to a different style. For instance, ease in. So we can ease this out and ease that in. If you twirl down, see how we twirled that effect, we can twirl down the keyframe, and now you can see the keyframes in here. And these little handles help you drag this around, and it's going to change how that animation ends or begins. Linear keyframes are, well, I'll show you the difference. These are Bezier keyframes, so you can see they're smooth, but if we select both of them, right click and change to linear, now they're more robotic, and they'll start at 100% and they'll end at 100%. But with Bezier type keyframes or ease in, ease out, they smooth in or smooth out. Hard to see with something like Gaussian blur, but you can definitely see it if you're moving a clip or a title or something on the screen. So that's really easy. Now, what if I wanted to share this on these two clips? I want them to have the same thing. They're all different lengths. So you could copy and paste them. So I could just copy the first one, copy, select these two, right click, and paste attributes. And in here, I could choose Gaussian blur, click OK, and now guess what? They do that same kind of focus thing too. If you're going to use this a lot, right click on a clip and save it as a preset. And for this one, you would anchor it to the endpoint. A preset means it'll stay inside Premiere Pro, and you can reuse this over and over and over again. So if you've come up with the ultimate kind of animation, you don't have to constantly recreate it. This is really good for wedding videographers who constantly need certain kinds of push in and you know, even a slow push in 5%. You just have a whole bunch of presets. So I'll leave this Gaussian blur preset, click OK. And if we go back to my effects, you can see there it is right there. So if we go to this one you can't double click on, you have to drag it. And now we've got the same effect. So really easy. And watch this, select those two and those, right click, remove attributes, and get rid of that Gaussian blur. I'm not going to get rid of anything else, just that, click OK. So it's just good to remember those kinds of things. Oh yeah, do I need to apply that effect? Or I made a mess of things. I don't want to start again. I want everything minus those effects. You don't have to click each one and delete, click and delete. You can globally just get rid of all of those that easily. Let's go to this clip here. And I want to crop this guy out. So where would you do that? Back over in the effects. And if you search for crop, remember, double click on it, and I've added crop. So I can crop this out. Again, I'm just dragging these around. I don't really care what the numbers are. Okay, so I've got a crop on here, and you can also click on the effect too. And when you do that, you get these little blue handles around. So if you can either have a specific number, like a 50% crop, or if you're doing complete thirds in a frame, and you can do it 33.3, that kind of thing. You could also feather the edges if you want. I don't want to. But here's what a lot of people will do is they see the clip in the crop and they think, well, all I have to do is scale and the crop will stay, but the stuff in the crop, the clip will get bigger. Well, let's try that. So I'll close up crop, open up motion, and scale this, and everything moves. And this drives people nuts. And rightly so, because scale is at the top and then crop is below it. So you're thinking the scale would work its way down and the crop would crop it. Well, the odd thing about the stacking order of these effects is these top ones, the intrinsic effects, motion, opacity, and time remapping, come after everything else. Even though they're right at the top, they're after. So how would you crop something? How would you scale something and crop it? Well, that's what this is for. Go back and look for transform. There's the transform effect, and it's happening after the crop, before motion. So now when I scale, I'll drag transform above. Now when I scale, it's happening before the crop. If you drag it after the crop, then it's just like the regular scale, but you want that before. So that's the stacking order. Transform into the crop, into motion, and out. It's an easy one to miss. I use this a lot. I've got a whole bunch of split screens that I created specifically with this kind of effect. All right, next up. This is an easy one to miss for new users. So I've created a call out here, and I've got a fairly long clip. And I want to have this, as best as possible, I want this call out to follow the biker as he's going along. I don't want it to change the scale, but I'm going to move that along. So I'll select this graphic. And in the effects control panels, you'll notice something new, and that's vector motion. Watch this. If I click on something different, no vector motion. Click on a title, I get vector motion. Adobe added this not too long ago, strictly for Essential Graphics titles, that allows you to infinitely scale something up. If you're used to doing this with Illustrator files in After Effects, that's what this is. It's an infinite frame that you can scale. So I'm going to use that for position. So there's no position information here. I shouldn't have moved that. I want to start here. I don't want to actually have this before there. So I'll click position. And here's a little tip. If you have a scroll wheel or a trackpad, you can scroll motion forward. And I don't want to grab this because it's not going to grab all the pieces. So I'm going to move this by changing the numbers. So you can see some of this gets a little bit hard to see. So I'm going to move this over. And move that up. And let's say that I made a mistake here and then I wanted to do this. Oh, I'll drag the position here, drag it up. I'm trying to create an issue where I've got an error like this, and then I try to fix it like this, and watch what happens. You see it jumping around, and you're wondering, well, why was that? I changed that keyframe, but where's that? Where's that? And that happens because the keyframes you're zoomed out too far. This is an easy, I do this sometimes. It's because when you're zoomed all the way out, multiple keyframes are so close to each other, those little triangles or the little diamond shapes are on top of each other. You can't see the fact that you've got more than one keyframe. So that's what this little thing is here. You drag this around, and this is a notoriously horrible interface. Oh my God, I can't tell you how much this drives me nuts. As you're trying to drag this around, what you would think would happen is while you're zooming, it would zoom into where the playhead is while you're zooming. Well, it doesn't. I don't know where it zooms. It's just all over the place. So now you got to move this nasty thing and then try to find it and then zoom in again. Oh, and then it disappears. And then you got to try to find it. You can use these buttons here to jump between them. Sometimes you can, oh, and that's over there and that, oh, up. So it's not perfect. So there it is. There's the stray keyframe. When you're zoomed in this far, every one of these is one frame. That's how close they are together. And when you zoom out, they look like they're one. So this one is just, I don't even need that. So I'll just delete it. And now it's going to move freely. Trust me, you're going to run up against this. One of your effects, especially with a longer clip, is you're going to run up against this. Why is that stupid thing doing what it's doing? Okay. All right. So let's zoom out. And if you double click on this, you can zoom out. Okay. So it makes no sense for this title to be way over there until it gets here. So I'm going to find this keyframe. Here's another one. If you add the shift key and move these, you'll snap to the keyframe. I use this every single day because if you're moving like this and you think you're on it, you could, again, be 1 or 2 or 3 frames away. So it's best to make sure you're snapping on that, and you can do that with these buttons here. So I'm going to add an opacity for this. So I'll twirl that down. I'll open up my shape and I'll add an opacity keyframe at 100%. And I'll go down to my text and I'll add an opacity keyframe. And there's also another shape. Okay. So I will go back 1 frame and then I'll change my opacity to 0. 0. So now watch what happens. Oh. Perfect example of me making a mistake. So I went the wrong way. I went forward instead of backwards. So here we have 0%, then we have 100%. I actually wanted these opposite. So I wanted this 1 keyframe to the other side. Now it disappears and it shows up. But you don't get that, it's not going to fade in because it's 1 frame, boom, and it shows up. I just have to make sure that this is at, oh, see this one's at 1%, and you will see that. So now let's just look at this clip. So it pops in and it follows him around. Okay, that's really easy, typical. But you can run into these problems, again, especially with long clips. Here's another tip. Let's say you've got this edit and you want to edit these keyframes. When everything is closed, they just look like circles. But this little beautiful thing down here will show only the keyframed properties. Oh, look, now I can get to all my keyframes so easy. If you're an After Effects user, this is the Uber key. In After Effects, if you type the U key, it will only show you the keyframes for the keyframe properties, because this can get quite long with a bunch of effects. Here's the only caveat. If you add an effect and then you have this on, it's not going to automatically flip it. You have to turn it off and turn it on. also will allow you to show only edited properties. If you have no keyframes, but you have changes, this one, show only edited properties, will only show you the properties, not the keyframes, because there are none. It'll show you the properties of anything you've changed. This is a good one because maybe you've accidentally made a change, or you've got something showing up like I did. I thought I had 0% opacity. I had 0.1%. I could still see it. And of course, you can go back to all properties. The cool thing is you can add keyboard shortcuts to this. So you could add an Uber key to this so it works like After Effects. Next up, let me show you this little refresh bug that drives me crazy. Okay. So let's do that. Let me just add a Gaussian blur to this right in the middle. So I'll add no blurriness, and then I'll blur, and then I'll add no blurriness, and we've got this blur. Okay, watch what happens when I change this, the duration. It doesn't always happen, but oh yeah, there we go. There we go. Do you see that? I had to wiggle this to have those show up. That will drive you nuts. It's been there forever. Hopefully one day it gets fixed. Now, the last thing I want to show you is pinning to clip. And that's in the effects controls, this little flyout here. If you turn this off, right now in this clip, I can only get to the beginning of the clip or the end of the clip. Some people want to actually add a keyframe, like a scale keyframe, before you see it and after you see it. That way it looks like completely natural motion. Because people with a discerning eye, when you put the scale property right at the beginning, they actually see no motion and then some motion. So let's do that right now. So I'll open up motion, hit scale, leave that at 100%, and let's do this to 130%. This is the way I like to make keyframes for the end, is I make them in the middle and then I drag them. It's a little easier to handle. So that's what that looks like. If you click on the flyout menu and turn pin to clip off, now you'll be able to zoom out even further. So you can see I can zoom past here. So I can take 100% past here, and you can't take it past the end, past here. Oh, we've got more on this clip. This is actually quite a long clip. Oh, let's jiggle the handle again. And now my keyframe is way over there. There it is. So if I've got another clip here, so it only works if you have another clip after it. So now I've got a keyframe before and I've got a keyframe after it. So it will start scaling before and it will finish scaling after, even when the clip cuts off. So that's useful. This really was something that Final Cut Pro 7 users really liked, and it took a while for Premiere Pro to add, but they did many, many years ago. It's been in Premiere Pro, but it's an easy one to miss, turning that on and off. I leave it off unless I need it, because you can accidentally leave a keyframe out. If you add a keyframe on a 3-second clip and you cut it in half, that 3 seconds is still way out there. And you might wonder, why is it I don't see the keyframe? You don't, because you had it when it was 3 seconds. So you'd unpin the clip or drag the duration out, wiggle the handle, and then find it. So these are the things that I think are important just to remember, because it's the combination of all of them, and you remembering them, because one of these will come up, and you'll be wondering why something is or isn't doing what it should be, and it's because that darn effects control panel is something in there. So that's my big effects control teardown. Hey, if you're new to Video Revealed and you found this informative, take a moment and subscribe. We do appreciate it. If you want to support us some more, you can do that on videorevealed.com/shop. Donate once or monthly. We really appreciate all of our wonderful donors. Till next time, I'm Colin Smith, and it's my job to keep you informed about the many things in Premiere Pro that you are aware of, and maybe some things like jiggling that handle that you didn't know.